There comes a moment in every life when pleasure begins to whisper like a god. It promises warmth, belonging, power, and a temporary end to loneliness. But in the silence that follows, something within us feels smaller, colder, and strangely enslaved. This is the story of how desire, once the servant of love, became its master, and how the modern soul can find its way home. Long before psychology named the patterns of addiction, the ancients knew that the body remembers what the soul forgets. When we confuse longing for love, when we trade awe for appetite, the heart begins to orbit around something lower than itself. What was once sacred becomes mechanical. The divine act of union becomes an act of consumption. And somewhere in that transaction, innocence fades. Children are born knowing the rhythm of purity. Watch how a child gazes at the world. There is wonder, not lust. Curiosity, not craving. Yet a single household without reverence can wound that sense forever. The child who hears the parents, quarrels, who feels the thick air of hidden shame, absorbs that distortion silently. Before words, the psyche already learns that love is mixed with fear, that intimacy carries guilt. Thus begins the exile from paradise, the mind split between its conscience and its appetites. In this exile, man searches for comfort in woman, and woman searches for safety in man. But neither truly seeks the other. Both seek the echo of their lost connection with God. The man, frightened by emptiness, makes the woman his savior. The woman, flattered by his need, becomes powerful through his weakness. And so begins the ancient loop, the addict and the supplier, the worshiper and the idol, each feeding from the other while starving inside. Every civilization that glorified pleasure soon faced its decline, not because pleasure is evil, but because it was never meant to rule. Desire is holy only when it bows to something higher. The moment it becomes a throne, the human spirit begins to die by degrees. You can see it in the eyes of people scrolling endlessly for stimulation, in the fatigue of marriages built on performance rather than presence, in the confusion of a generation that mistakes attention for affection. We are told to follow our feelings, to express every impulse as freedom. Yet freedom without conscience is only another form of slavery. The brain floods with dopamine, the body trembles with the chemistry of reward, and the soul mistakes that surge for truth. But when the surge fades, the void deepens. The cycle repeats, each indulgence slightly less satisfying, slightly more desperate. That is not love. That is bondage disguised as ecstasy. What if love was never meant to burn, but to illuminate? What if the purpose of sexual energy was not gratification, but creation, an echo of divine power to bring life, art, compassion, and renewal into the world? When that current is hijacked by ego, it turns inward, feeding on itself. It becomes obsession, fantasy, possession. It drains vitality from the heart and replaces it with hunger. Man's fall did not begin with the forbidden fruit. It began when he ceased to listen to the quiet wisdom within. The conscience, that gentle instrument of God, warned him each time he confused need with love. But pride said otherwise. Pride wanted to feel like a god. Pride wanted control. And when pride entered the human bloodstream, humility left. From that moment, love became labor and union became escape. The cure is not repression. Suppression only turns desire into shadow. The cure is awareness, a sacred witnessing of one's own impulses without judgment or indulgence. When you observe the craving instead of obeying it, something miraculous happens. The craving begins to lose authority. Light returns to the dark place. You remember that you are not the body's servant. You are the soul that animates it. To heal desire, one must see clearly how it operates. Every temptation begins as a whisper promising relief. It grows louder when we resist with hatred or fear, but when we meet it with calm understanding, it dissolves. This is the forgotten art of self-mastery, not through force, but through seeing. Awareness is the fire that purifies without burning. There was a time when humanity treated intimacy as a sacred exchange. The body was a temple, not a marketplace. The gaze between man and woman was a mirror of divine reflection, not a negotiation of needs. We lost that reverence when we replaced silence with noise, prayer with performance, and devotion with desire. Yet deep inside, the memory remains, the longing to be known beyond the flesh. What would happen if two human beings came together not to consume, but to reveal God to each other? If a man saw in a woman not an escape from loneliness, but a reminder of the divine feminine? If a woman looked upon a man not for security, but to witness the divine masculine awakened, the energy between them would cease to be carnal and become creative. Their union would no longer drain life, it would generate it. The transformation begins within. Each time you notice lust rising and choose stillness instead, you reclaim a fragment of paradise. Each moment you forgive rather than resent, the old addiction loses ground. You start to understand that the real ecstasy is peace. Pleasure fades, peace endures, pleasure ends in craving, peace begins in completion. The modern world has inverted this order. It teaches that satisfaction creates peace, but peace is the only soil where satisfaction can grow. Without inner stillness, every pleasure spoils. Without conscience, every freedom becomes its opposite. The mind becomes a restless sea, the heart a house with broken walls. The purpose of life is not to deny the body, but to sanctify it, to restore the harmony between flesh and spirit, so that every act, even desire, becomes an instrument of awareness. When consciousness rules instinct, instinct becomes grace. When instinct rules consciousness, grace becomes lust. The difference between heaven and hell is not geography, but direction, upward or downward, self-aware or self-absorbed. The true miracle of love is that it begins when desire ends. When you no longer seek to take, you finally begin to give. When you stop reaching for completion in another, you rediscover it within. Then love ceases to be a transaction and becomes a transmission of being. It is no longer two halves seeking to fuse. It is wholeness meeting wholeness. Imagine standing before someone you once desired and feeling only reverence. No urge, no greed, only recognition, another soul walking the same path back to the source. That is purity, not prudishness, but clarity. In that state, the gaze heals rather than wounds. The touch blesses rather than takes. The word becomes prayer. This return to innocence is not the denial of knowledge, but the fulfillment of it. You have tasted the fruit of duality, and now choose the simplicity beyond it. You have seen how lust promises unity but delivers division, how indulgence pretends to free you while deepening the chain. And now you long not for excitement but for stillness, the quiet in which love is self-existing. The mind resists this transformation because it fears death. Lust is the mind's way of staying busy, of avoiding silence where the ego cannot breathe. Every craving is an alarm against awakening. To sit still while the craving screams is to face one's mortality. Yet beyond that scream lies immortality, the awareness that observes desire without being consumed by it. Humanity's sickness is not sexual but spiritual. The same energy that builds life can destroy it when divorced from conscience. Technology, power, and sex are neutral forces. It is the heart that determines their holiness. When consciousness falls asleep, these forces become weapons. When consciousness awakens, they become miracles. Look at the world. Art once born of divine inspiration now sells rebellion as freedom. Music glorifies the trance of lust. Cinema turns intimacy into spectacle. Children learn performance before they learn virtue. And yet beneath all this noise, the ancient ache for real love still trembles. The heart remembers even when the culture forgets. True love has rhythm. It is patient, slow, deliberate. It waits for consent from the soul before it moves through the body. It does not rush to possess, it pauses to perceive. It does not burn, it glows. And when it joins two beings, it does so under the quiet authority of heaven, not the fever of the moment. To rediscover that rhythm, we must unlearn urgency. The body is not the enemy. It is the instrument through which spirit learns expression, but the instrument must be tuned. Every act of awareness polishes its strings. Every moment of restraint strengthens its resonance. The goal is not suppression, but refinement, the conversion of raw energy into luminous presence. Think of the ascetic not as a man who hates pleasure, but as one who has outgrown it. He has tasted something infinitely sweeter, freedom from compulsion. His joy is steady, self-contained, immune to the rise and fall of sensation. That joy is available to all who dare to face their own shadows without running. Forgiveness plays a central role in this healing. For many, sexual confusion began in betrayal, abuse, abandonment, or exposure too soon. The body remembers trauma as craving. The soul translates pain into pattern. We repeat what we resent until we forgive. The moment we forgive, the pattern dissolves. Forgiveness is the ultimate alchemy. It turns poison into wisdom. Every time you choose forgiveness over bitterness, you reclaim creative energy once trapped in the past. That energy rises through the heart, transforming desire into compassion. You no longer seek to consume beauty. You become beauty. You no longer demand love. You radiate it. The inner masculine and feminine reconcile, and the war between them ends. This is what the mystics meant by the marriage of heaven and earth within. The true union is not between two bodies, but within one consciousness. When the inner man and woman, the will and the heart, the reason and the feeling, embrace without domination, something luminous is born. That is the soul's child, wisdom. In that state, sex loses its tyranny. It becomes optional, sacred, occasional, a whisper of gratitude rather than a cry for relief. Its power is not measured by intensity, but by innocence. And innocence is not naivety, it is mastery. Modern society fears this message because it cannot profit from peace. Industries thrive on stimulation, but a person who needs nothing cannot be sold anything. To awaken is the greatest rebellion. To love without lust, to see without wanting, to live without addiction. This is revolution of consciousness. So how does one begin? Not through vows of celibacy or bursts of guilt, but through still attention. Sit quietly. Watch your thoughts as clouds passing through the sky. When desire arises, do not judge it. Simply witness. The moment you see it clearly, it loses power. The witness is closer to God than the warrior who fights. Gradually, the energy that once descended into lust begins to ascend into awareness. The same force that once sought release now seeks revelation. You begin to feel creativity return, art, music, tenderness, insight. You feel connected to life in a new way, not as an owner, but as a participant in a divine orchestra. And then, slowly, love reappears. Not as excitement, but as peace. Not as drama, but as depth. You realize that love is not an event, but a state of being. It does not depend on another's approval, nor does it fear loss. It is self-generating, self-sustaining. It flows from presence. The cure for lust is not purity culture, it is conscious presence. The cure for shame is not indulgence, it is forgiveness. The cure for separation is remembrance, remembering who you were before the world taught you to perform, remembering that you are not broken, only asleep. And every moment of awareness is a gentle awakening. The new humanity will not be born through technology or ideology, but through this awakening. When enough individuals transcend the hypnosis of desire, a quiet shift will ripple through culture. Art will once again serve beauty. Education will nurture wonder instead of competition. Children will learn that love is strength, not weakness. And relationships will become sanctuaries, not battlefields. In that world, the masculine will no longer dominate, and the feminine will no longer manipulate. Both will reflect the same divine light in different colors. The man will no longer seek the mother in every woman. The woman will no longer seek the father in every man. Each will stand whole, meeting not from need but from overflow. This is not utopia, it is restoration. It is the return to the order that always existed but was forgotten. It begins every time one person chooses awareness over reaction, reverence over thrill, truth over pride. The smallest act of inner honesty becomes cosmic rebellion. When the mind finally surrenders to the heart, when the body bows to the soul, when the soul bows to God, harmony is restored. Then the same energy that once enslaved us becomes our instrument. Sexual energy rises as worship, not waste. Every heartbeat becomes a prayer, every breath an offering. And when two awakened beings meet, they do not fall in love. They rise into it. Their union does not ignite lust. It amplifies light. Through them, the world remembers what love was meant to be, the echo of eternity moving through time. So let this be the invitation. Do not run from desire, and do not worship it. Stand in its presence as a witness, calm and unafraid. Let awareness purify what ignorance distorted. Let forgiveness heal what shame concealed. Let silence teach what words never could. Because in the end, the battle between lust and love is not a war between good and evil. It is the slow awakening of spirit reclaiming its throne. And when it does, the tyrant of pleasure will bow before the king of peace. That is the true cause and cure of sexual conflict. The fall was forgetfulness. The cure is remembrance. Remember who you are, a child of the eternal, clothed in flesh but not confined by it. Remember that love is not found through the body, but revealed through awareness. Remember, and you will be free,